Own the Road with Kelly and Bob, the USA 250 Tour, brought to you by Mueller.
We, the people of the United States of America.
Hi, and thanks for joining us for this episode of On the Road with Kelly and Bob. I'm Kelly Phillips.
And I'm Bob Phillips. This is a special year-long edition of our weekly show called the USA 250 Tour. It's in celebration of the 250th anniversary of the United States of America.
So, what's on tap this week?
The state of Montana is our destination. Now, there's a lot we could talk about in Montana, possibly more than in any other state. Its vast, rugged, natural beauty has earned it the nickname Big Sky Country. Just visit and you'll understand why.
Yeah, it seems to be mostly about the great outdoors in Montana, right? Glacier National Park is there, and part of Yellowstone, too. There's a rich Native American history and culture, and a strong cowboy culture as well.
All of that and much more. But in my humble opinion, one thing in Montana's history has possibly shaped this state more than any other, and that is the time spent here by the famous Lewis and Clark expedition.
The Lewis and Clark expedition was not just a couple of curious explorers who wanted to see unknown lands. It was an official mission ordered by U.S. President Thomas Jefferson. And like most things, there is a backstory.
You see, since early Europeans first arrived in this new world, the French pretty much controlled the Mississippi and everything after that. When America was young, that wasn't a problem, but as the country grew, some saw the mighty Mississippi River as the farthest point they would be able to expand our nation going west.
So, knowing that, Napoleon and the French needed money. President Jefferson offered to buy the port of New Orleans from them. But when the delegates arrived in Paris to make the deal, the French made an offer they couldn't refuse.
Why not buy it all, the French asked. We'll sell you all of what they called Louisiana, which at that time stretched all the way through the Midwest to Canada and across to what would eventually become our northwestern states.
So Jefferson took the deal and more than doubled the size of the United States in a single purchase. Then, naturally, he wanted to know just what he had bought. So he commissioned Captain Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to go take a look.
Setting out on May 14th of 1804, the duo took their Corps of Discovery expedition to what would eventually become the states of, ready for this?
Okay.
Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, Kansas, Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana, Idaho, Washington, and Oregon.
Phew.
16 states and more than 8,000 miles.
And here's the reason we are in Montana during their almost 28-month journey. They spent 6 months in what would eventually become Montana, far more than any other state. This stretch of their trip was not merely a passage, but a profound engagement with a landscape and cultures that would shape the expedition and this region's future.
So today you see evidence of Lewis and Clark just about everywhere you look in Montana, from Great Falls, which Lewis wrote was the grandest sight I had ever beheld, to all the things they named for their employer, Thomas Jefferson, to the Lewis and Clark Caverns found in what's called the Jefferson Valley. It's obvious that this expedition and the people behind it made its mark on Montana.
So get a little bit on Lewis and Clark Caverns because it's part of our area. So these are some old artifacts. In the early days, people used to break off formations and take them home. Mm-hmm. Some of these were donated back to us. I worked up there for 3 summers. I was a guide when I was in college.
That's Arlene Weber, a volunteer guide at the Jefferson County Museum in Whitehall, Montana. We came here to this tiny but impressive town To find out more about the impact of Lewis and Clark on this area and on this state.
We just knew this museum would tell us everything we could ever want to know about Lewis and Clark. We were so wrong.
Arlene wanted to tell us instead about all the people who have made Whitehall and the Jefferson Valley what it is today. That, and not Lewis and Clark or Thomas Jefferson, is what this museum is all about. It was refreshing.
I usually start people with our drugstore Indian. He's one of us. I grew up here in Whitehall, and this was out in front of our drugstore every day. So you can see here's the picture of the druggist with our wooden Indian.
Long before Lewis and Clark and the Corps of Discovery arrived in what would one day become Montana, indigenous peoples were here. Arlene knows a little about that.
There were humans going up and down this valley for probably thousands of years. There was an archaeologic dig done here probably about 7 years ago, and I talked to one of the archaeologists, and they got below a layer of volcanic ash, which was probably laid down when Crater Lake, that mountain, exploded, because it put down a lot of ash in this part of the country.
But even the ancient history takes a back seat here at the Jefferson Valley Museum in Whitehall, Montana. What this museum is really all about is your next door neighbor's third cousin, the great uncle of that kid you sat next to in the 7th grade, the person who had the first automobile in town.
Anyone and everyone that made any kind of contribution here in Whitehall, they are all important, even though you have likely never heard of, well, any of them. Oh, there was at least one famous resident.
But one of our probably best known people was Chet Huntley. So if you remember the Huntley...
Chet Huntley from Huntley Brinkley came from Whitehall?
Yes, he was actually born in the depot in Cardwell because his father was a railroad man. He spent his early childhood schooling years in eastern Montana, and then his father got transferred back here, so he graduated from Whitehall High School in 1929.
But other than old Chet of the Huntley Brinkley report, this place is all about not so much famous people or even what went on here, but who was doing it.
We asked Arlene to give us the quick tour, starting with a bit about the unique building where the museum is housed.
This old barn, you can see the condition it was in when they acquired it. Now we have our military section in here. Military is very important in the whole state of Montana, but even in Whitehall, we've had so many young men who have gone to war. We also have had some women, like right behind you here is this uniform of Eleanor Blyler. This small display is one of our town residents. This is Mike Miyake when he was a young man. His mother was a sweet person, but she was in the Gila Bend Japanese internment camp during World War II. And Mike was born there. His grandfather, who's one of the gentlemen up in that picture, helped build the Milwaukee Railroad through the Jefferson Canyon. And this is our favorite fossil. We named it Milligan after Roy Milligan, who was really one of our founders and did so much research. But this was dug up in the valley by a farmer plowing a field. This is our doctor's room. Of course, we've had a number of physicians over the years. One of our earlier ones was Dr. Packard. He came here essentially out of medical school. He was the first doctor to make house calls in a vehicle instead of a horse and buggy. This is a picture of Dr. Hill. He's the doctor who delivered me. He also cut my hair when I was a kid. This suit was a wedding suit. This was Sigrid Woodard. She was my 5th grade teacher. You live in a small town, you kind of know everybody, and everybody knows you.
Arlene Weber wants people to visit their little museum here in Whitehall, Montana, so they can see and feel what she does, the sacrifices and ingenuity of those who came before us. Because who we are, she told us, is partly who we were.
I think if you don't know your past, I think it's harder to appreciate what you have today. So my grandparents were Lutheran and Catholic, not acceptable to marry outside of your religion at that time. My Lithuanian side, my grandfather left because the Tsar was conscripting men into his service, which was essentially a death sentence. Once you know that and what they had to go through for you to be where you are today, it makes a big difference.
Okay, it turns out There is no quick tour of the Jefferson Valley Museum, nor should there be. We felt this collection was important because it's local. It's all about the people that made this area what it is today.
And trust us here, there is a lot of stuff of national and even international importance here that these folks could talk about. But they have chosen instead to put that spotlight on their friends, their neighbors, their families. As we say in Texas, they dance with the ones that brung them. And like I said at the beginning of the story, there is something incredibly refreshing about that.
Let's go back to our conversation with Arlene Weber, starting with our question about the many Lewis and Clark murals we noticed all over town.
Now, why does this area have all of the Lewis and Clark murals?
Well, because they did come right through our valley. We have a hatchet head that was found about where they think Lewis and Clark camped down towards Cardwell. Now, we just tell people probably that's it, because we could say that because nobody knows for sure, so it makes a good story.
But they had such detailed logs of where they thought they were and exactly what they did and what they hunted and while they were in an area. So
we know part of the expedition came through on the Jefferson River. I guess they did the murals because it is a part of our history. They spent some time here. Sacagawea, ran into her people. It wasn't in this valley, but it was not that far from here.
Of course, Lewis and Clark named your rivers, Jefferson and Madison rivers.
Well, and there's a Clark's nuthatch. It's a bird that we have in this area, and Clark found that and named it. So they're kind of an annoying little bird, but they like to steal stuff. I mean, it's a pretty bird. But it was Clark who found that, and it got named for him. There's a lot of little communities that used to exist in this valley. I think at one time we had almost a dozen. So Whitehall survived, a little place called Silver Star, which really isn't a town, but it's a wide spot in the road, and Cardwell. So that's about all that's really left of the communities. There used to be one called Pleasant Valley. It was an unincorporated town, but they had their own school, had their own church. Whitehall was settled primarily by Methodists. Here in Whitehall you had Episcopal Methodists, and Pleasant Valley was the Southern Methodists. Didn't get along real good at that time, so they kind of kept themselves separate. And then when it became the United Methodist Church, they were supposed to get along. And eventually it did work out pretty good. Whitehall has had a lot of fires. A lot of our original structures are long gone because they all burned, except our theater. That's in that center block of town. That theater building is the only original structure from that block. From 1913 anyway. There was a wooden structure there prior to that. So that whole block just totally burned down, and everything but the theaters also burned. I think there's 3 more fires that burned it again. Yeah, when you say a hot time in the old town, that fits Whitehall. But the Borden was, originally it looked like this, and then this structure you see here is still standing. It's been remodeled. There was a group that got together and wanted to make sure that we retained that building. So now there are some apartments and...
Used to be a dance hall before it was hotel rooms, it says.
Correct, yeah. There was the woodwork upstairs was beautiful, all that oak flooring and the way it wasn't just laid straight. It was like done in a square pattern that fanned out. It was a beautiful place. A lot of the railroad workers used to stay in the Borden Hotel. Mrs. Borden's husband died in 1922. You can see Lot and Hilda here. I always knew her as Mrs. Borden because growing up, my dad was a carpenter. He did a lot of work for her. He hated to get the call because the plumbing was that old cast iron that you had to pour the solder in. So yeah, he'd just kind of go, ugh. when she would call. But we always got a free meal each week. That was part of his pay. She would let us have a free meal.
Good for y'all.
Oh yeah. Well, and she ran a tight ship. I mean, Mrs. Borden was somebody who, if you worked for her, you worked. But she was also very generous with a lot of people did not realize. She put a lot of kids through school, gave them their start, with a job there and taught them some good skills. So she really did help a lot of people, but she didn't let everybody know. The train came through here in 1892 and built a depot. Now they wanted to call this location Milk Ranch because one of the very first settlements was a guy by the name of Mr. Root, and he had a dairy farm, so they called it Milk Ranch. But there was another gentleman by the name of Major Brooke. He wasn't a major, they just sounded better than Mr. But Major Brooke had the Whitehall stage station, which was a few more miles north of here than the Root Ranch. And he was also pretty well set politically. He had a lot of pull, and he knew the right people. Because I think it was General Sherman came out during the Indian Wars and stayed at the stage stop. I mean, so he had connections. But anyway, he told the railroad, no, you're not going to call this place Milk Ranch, because I would have been a graduate of Milk Ranch High. So yeah, we would have been the Fighting Udders or something like that. We have kind of an unusual relic here from World War II. This gentleman, Victor Janicaro, was in a unit that liberated one of the German towns from the Nazis. And they were supposed to, of course, destroy anything Nazi. But like a lot of soldiers, he brought home a couple souvenirs. They were in a trunk, and his health wasn't the best, so he thought maybe he better do something with these. So he donated them to the museum, this flag and this book. The book is kind of a look at how nice Hitler is type book. It was a piece of propaganda. It was put out in 1934. If you step back from the propaganda, there's two other kind of unique things about the book. One is it gives you a glimpse of Germany prior to World War II, and some of the photography is very well done. But the unique thing, and it's kind of hard to see, but you'll notice those pictures are not printed on the pages.
They're actually pictures glued to the...
They're glued, and you got them by buying cigarettes. You had to buy enough German cigarettes to get all the pictures, and then you would glue them in your book.
It's like green stamps or
Yeah,
something.
kind of like Nazi green stamps. Yeah. More stuff from World War I. This set of field glasses is kind of an unusual artifact. The military didn't have enough of these, so they asked private citizens to donate them to the military. And this family actually got them back after World War I. So we don't know where they saw service. There's a dent that wasn't there when they gave them to them. I could make up a great story about how it's probably
He
enemy.
was jumping out of an airplane and
or an enemy soldier was attacking and he hit him over the head.
Oh,
So
I like that better.
Yeah. That's kind of one of those things you don't see very often. It's just amazing that the family got the field glasses back. Mining is a big part of our history. As I said, like Virginia City, Alder, a lot of people came from there, and there were mining activities all over this valley and in our mountains. A lot of it was gold, some was silver. There was even some copper. You can see that core sample has some native copper shining in it. This piece of kind of unimpressive black rock came out of the Mayflower mine. That was one of the richest gold mines in the country at one time. Unfortunately, they ran into too much water. But my father worked there in the 1930s, and he would tell me they didn't put it in ore cars, they just bagged it because there was so much gold in the ore. He said when gold was $20 an ounce, they were getting $10,000 a ton in gold. So we always used to joke about if we just had 1 ton.
Just one.
1 ton. This coat is bearskin. So if you would have been driving a wagon with a team of horses in the winter, you would have wanted to wear this. I'm going to let you just feel how heavy this thing is. Just careful. It is heavy.
oh my goodness, and people wore this.
Yes.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's heavy.
Yeah.
But it would keep somebody warm.
Oh, yeah, you needed it because our winters can still be pretty brutal here. 30, 40 below is not uncommon. Over here's our music room. We've got a little bit of a variety here, but we've got the Victrola. It does still work. Now we've taken out the crank thing. Let me fire this up for you. It's a fairly new needle, so it should sound pretty good. Okay, I'm going to turn up the volume for you.
Open the door.
Open the door. I get little kids in here, they're dancing.
And then you turn the volume down. Close the door.
Wow. Gosh, gosh, I love it.
This instrument here was a violin uke or a ukulele, sold door to door in the 20s, high pressure sales, and the salespeople were well versed in how to play them. Unfortunately, most people couldn't figure out once they bought it
How to play it.
How to play it. They have a very unusual sound. Sounded a little more like a violin, but it's so you could pluck the strings or you could use a bow. And this is a list of songs that was found with one of these instruments. They used to have a lot of dances in the early days. Every week there was a dance. These were some of the popular dance tunes. I never could find out what Dill Pickles was.
Sounded like.
Yeah, I couldn't find that. But here's one called Fatal Wedding. Now, if you go on YouTube and put in Fatal Wedding song, you can hear it. It's like a really bad soap opera.
Oh.
It's about a wedding, and the wife shows up at the wedding, and her husband's marrying somebody else, and she has a dead baby in her arms. It gets worse. So anyway, but the young man who wrote that also wrote "Good Night, Irene." Yeah. So our railroad room, we keep photos. People can come in here and look through the photos and actually, get a little closer to some of the history. But the Milwaukee, the Northern Pacific, all important parts of our history. So this was from Mayflower. So that I mentioned the Mayflower mine earlier. There was a town of Mayflower as well. And the women made this. You can see it's in very delicate condition.
And you can see some of the names that were.
You had to have something to do up in a mining town.
That's the real authentic patchwork quilt there.
As you can see, we got a lot of things in here. But Eastern Star, Masonic Order, all of our small towns had a lodge, as well as the cities. And ours was no exception. This rug was made in 1946 by our Eastern Star ladies, but you need to take a close look to see what they made it out of. It's a little unusual.
Looks like
Stockings?
They took their hosiery,
Yeah.
cut them into strips, dyed them where necessary, and that's what they hooked this rug out of. So this is one of the earliest official highway maps for the state of Montana. This one's from 1914. We do sell smaller, a 20 by 30 version of this. A lot of people have bought it. But it's back when we had 40 counties and there were fewer Indian reservations at the time. But right here is where Whitehall is. This is now what we call the Whitetail Road. It was one of the prime highways at the time. And then the Yellowstone Trail came through, right through Whitehall.
And where we are right now in Whitehall, we're just a little over 100 miles from the west entry to Yellowstone National Park?
Yeah, it's probably it's at least a 2-hour drive from here. Yeah. So it's not a bad jumping off point. You've got our beautiful Tobacco Root Mountains and the Highlands, Butte with its big historic district, Bozeman if you want to head that direction, Helena 65 miles to the north for the state capital.
You're in the center of it all.
We are, yes, but not everybody fortunately lives here. We like it that way. we like keeping a small population. And that is Jeanette Rankin, the first woman elected to Congress.
Yeah.
When she got out of college, one of her earliest jobs was teaching school here in Whitehall, Montana.
And the first woman elected to the U.S. Congress.
Wow.
And she was a member of the Whitehall Women's Club, came back after her first term in Congress and actually gave a talk. So it was very nice of her to come back to Whitehall after being, a famous person essentially. So,
She never forgot her roots.
So
Look at all the Dick and Jane books.
and when I was in first grade, that's what we had.
That's what I had.
We have another building, so we're not done yet.
Going outside now.
That log structure there, that's an original blacksmith shop. It was up in what we call the South Boulder on the Gilstrap Ranch. It was taken apart brought here and reassembled. So all the stuff that's inside is pretty much what it would have looked like when it was actually being used as a blacksmith shop.
And is this some old mining equipment?
A lot of this came from up at the Sunlight mine. They donated a lot of this to us. So the Sunlight was in operation clear back in the 1890s. This is a brick making machine here.
Oh, yeah.
There are 2 buildings in town that still have bricks made from this. And this was a mold to make it look kind of like stone. So if you go by the Thriftway gas station, the building just to the west of that, if you look at the base, it has the bricks with this front on them. And then where the High Country Credit Union is, it says Whitehall State Bank up on top of the building. It was built out of these bricks. So these were made all one at a time by hand.
Oh, think about how long that took.
Yeah. And we have our outhouse, because a lot of places, especially in the early days, had the old outhouse. But this is, the whole family could go at one time. This is a 3-seater. There's a lot of dairy business. This, you can see this foil here. It says blue cheese. Now, before Lewis and Clark Caverns was called Lewis and Clark, it was called Morrison Cave. Supposedly, they took this blue cheese up and cured it in that cavern.
In the caverns.
So, of course, there's a lot of cowboys. People usually think cowboys. Montana, you gotta have cowboys. So Clyde Aiken was a local guy around here, grew up here, and he collected all these spurs, and there's no 2 alike. Sean Davis is probably one of the better known cowboys from here. He was a bareback. He went into the National Hall of Fame. I can kind of remember him when I was a kid. You hear about him on TV. These are some seats out of our old theater. Our theater is still running. There was some high school kids and other groups that got together. It's been a few years ago, but they raised $100,000 here in Whitehall, got a digital projector with some additional money. They got new seats, and they replaced the old original silver screen.
And how many people live in Whitehall?
1,100 about, yeah.
Well, this is a prime example of the size of a town is rarely a measure of the depth of its history. We have found that right here at the Jefferson Valley Museum in Whitehall, Montana. The museum's collection reminds us that America wasn't just built on big cities or in marble halls. It was built in places just like this. So if you ever find yourself traveling through big sky country, do yourself a favor, pull off the road, step into the Jefferson Valley Museum, and see the story of America through the eyes of the people who have lived it. Thanks for joining us again this week for this week's edition of On the Road with Kelly and Bob, the USA 250 Tour. We'll be traveling all 50 states this year, so you don't want to miss an episode. Best thing to do, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, as well as YouTube. You can listen wherever you get your podcast, or the best thing to do, download that free Odyssey app. Listen anytime, anywhere.